My name is Jim Carson. I'm a Ford dealer, a Ford enthusiast, and I love Ford history. Cars like this beside me just fascinate me in the history of not only Ford, but of racing in North America. And you just can't separate this car from the great Mark Donahue, and that's what I really find interesting. You know, Mark Donahue goes on to be Roger Penske's most successful racer, and I think I don't have to talk about Donahue's career, but I'm really interested in that time when he was still an amateur and when his professional career was starting, and that's when he meets Yale Kneeland. It looks like Yale was his first financier, the one that really got Mark started in professional racing, if you will, when in '65 campaigning the Shelby GT 350Rs. There's a team that needs money. One of the owners is drafted into the military service, and Yale Nealon coincidentally meets somebody who's into racing, introduces Mark Donahue at the track, and kind of the rest is history. Yale buys that car for Donahue to campaign in '65. In exchange, Donohue teaches Yale how to drive as an amateur, and some thrilling components for Yale, as he writes. But that car, sadly, that R, was written off, and one of the 36 made is no longer with us, and that happened shortly thereafter. Yale Nealon has now purchased this '66 in January or February, I believe, of '66, and there's no reason to believe that Yale Nealon could have built this car on his own, because many of the parts from the written off R, again, the car that Donohue did drive and that Nealon owned, they were transferred over. Have to think, how much did Donohue have to do with the building of this car, replacing the R, transferring many of the original race parts that were made. But I think it's documented that Donohue didn't think the R was particularly well built and that he could improve on that car. He was upset that he lost one of the races by cutting a rear tire, and these rear fender wells are an example of what Donohue brought to the car. You know, when you think about early '66, Donohue is campaigning very successfully at 24-hour Daytona, followed up by a very successful 12 hours of Sebring, catches the eye of Ford Motor Company, and he's signed right then for the Le Mans program. One of the co-drivers in the Le Mans program is tragically killed in a racing accident. Donohue's at the funeral. He runs into Penske, he meets Penske rather, and Penske signs him on a race-by-race basis. So all of that is going on while this car is put together and assembled for his friend Yale Nealon. And certainly his competitors would say he was a great cheater, his teammates would say he was a great innovator, but isn't that the same for every successful racing team? And he had lots of great innovations, and some of them are featured on this car. So it's really hard to imagine how busy Donohue would have been in early '66 when this car was purchased by Yale to replace the R that had been written off. Behind me in this car is the very first SCCA legalized roll cage installed in any production race car. So I find that part fascinating. The car goes on to win the Northeast Championship in '67 with Yale driving the car in B Production. So I think for a collector and for somebody interested in the history of racing in North America, certainly a history of Mustangs and their great tradition, Shelby's, this car has it all.